A few technical difficulties. We'll be right with you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Doug Hewitt, and I'm the city manager here in Fayetteville, North Carolina. And I'm very pleased that you have decided to join us here tonight at City Hall to participate in our Police Chief Forum. Whether you're here in the audience or whether you're watching us on TV 7 or Facebook Live and with us, again, I do appreciate your time that you'll spend here with us tonight. I'm very excited to be able to present to you all, as I did yesterday, to the media, our three candidates for our next police chief. Mentioning them in order, up on the stage, we have Interim Chief Anthony Kelly. We have Deputy Chief James Henson, and Deputy Chief Gina Hawkins. Aiding me and the city in our search has been our consultant, Developmental Associates, and I'd like to now introduce Dr. Steve Strauss, who will actually moderate tonight's forum for me. But again, thank you all for coming out.
Let me turn on my microphone, then I'll echo what he's just said, which is so wonderful for all of you to be here. We worked extensively in North Carolina. We've helped a number of communities search for chiefs of police, and I can tell you that we seldom have a turnout that matches this whatsoever, and it's really wonderful to see this level of civic engagement. So applause to all of you for being here. I'd like to explain a little bit about our process so that you all know how we're going to be operating this evening and to make sure that you're clear about how we're going to proceed. But I want to start by giving you a little overview of the process that's brought these three fine candidates to Fayetteville tonight. They've been undergoing a very extensive process. It went on for about a little over 3 months, all the way through the application process. They went through an extensive screening process that included structured telephone interviews with the retired Chief of Police, Willie Williams. They all took psychological inventories. They all answered survey questions, and that qualified them to come to the city of Fayetteville with two other candidates to go through an assessment center process. Now, many of you all may not be familiar with an assessment center process, but it goes beyond the traditional interview approach where candidates actually have to demonstrate skills on a first-hand basis. So these candidates went through 4 different exercises. One of those was a written exercise where we gave them some information about sort of the existing culture of the Fayetteville Police Department, and they had to develop a plan of action for how they would respond and improve the culture. Secondly, they were all had what's called a coaching role play where they had to meet face-to-face with someone who was acting as a member of their staff, and they had to demonstrate their skills in terms of supervising and working effectively with that staff member. They all had a budget presentation exercise where we actually gave them the department budget, and they had to do an analysis and make a presentation and respond to a structured set of questions. And last of all, they all went through a simulated community meeting exercise where they all had to interact with folks about some problems that were representative of those that are being faced in Fayetteville, and had to work through those situations with those folks. These exercises were carried out and scored by 2 different sets of folks. Some of those folks were community members. I actually see 1 or 2 of them are here tonight. And they helped with the process, and they were paired with law enforcement professionals from across the state, and by the way, as well as we had a couple come in from South Carolina municipalities and help as well. And so we had a combination of those folks carry out the exercises, score the exercises in a very objective fashion, and provide their feedback to the city manager. And based on that information, the city manager has invited these 3 candidates to come back to Fayetteville tonight. So let me explain a little bit about the process for tonight. First of all, thank you all for your applause for the candidates. We'd ask you to hold that applause, any further applause, until the end of the session, because we want to make sure that everybody has a full amount of time to respond to the questions. We want to give them ample time to answer those questions, and we don't want to take up too much time with applause and so forth. So if you wouldn't mind, hold your applause until the end of the session. We have solicited questions. Over 50 so far, and you all have the opportunity to generate some more questions. You all may see that you have a white sheet that you've been given that where you can, I'm sorry, I've got that backwards. You have a blue sheet, right, where you can come up, identify any questions that you would like for us to consider. I can tell you we have a lot of questions already, but if you have a question that you feel is important to ask, by all means, write it down. Please print it so we can read it, and staff will be coming around and collecting those during the session. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer their questions, and we're going to rotate across the candidates. So we're going to start with Chief Hawkins, and then we'll go around. Each candidate will answer the first question, and then we'll start with Chief Henson, and then the next question we'll start with Chief Kelly. And again, I will be the bad guy and remind them if they're going too much over the 2-minute time limit. The second thing that I'd like to tell you all is that each and every question is important, and some of you may have submitted questions electronically, or again, you can do those on the cards that have been provided. And we're not going to be able to ask every single question tonight, but we will ensure that the candidate who is appointed as Chief of Police will have all those questions so that they understand the concerns and issues that the public has bringing to this key position for the city. Secondly, you have feedback forms, and those are the white forms. And what we'd like for you all to do, certainly by the end of the session, is if you'd like to write some comments. And you notice we're not asking you to say, we want this person to be chief, that person to be chief. We'd be much more interested in the feedback that you have about each of these candidates. What have you learned about this candidate that you think may mean they're a good fit for the city, or anything that you may have as a concern that you'd like to share on your feedback form? We'd be very interested in that information, and we will collect that also at the end of the evening. If you'd prefer to do it online, you can go to the city website and find the link to police chief search, and you can provide that information electronically. If you do so, you need to provide that feedback by no later than tomorrow at 4 o'clock, so that we have time to process all of that information. So we're ready to proceed. And is there anything further? I've covered it all. Okay. So we're going to start with Chief Hawkins, and we're asking each candidate to begin with a 2-minute presentation on telling us why you would be such a great fit to be the next Chief of Police for the city of Fayetteville.
Okay, great. So my name is Gina Hawkins, first of all, and I am from Columbus, Ohio.
Hit your button on the mic.
Nice.
Okay.
That works. Great. Start over. My name is Gina Hawkins, and I'm from Columbus, Ohio. I was born and raised. I went to school at North Carolina Central University. I started my college career there. I left there after 2 years and went to the city of Atlanta. I started with the city of Atlanta Police Department. I retired after 18 years from the city of Atlanta Police Department after doing multiple positions all the way up from patrol, supervision, internal affairs, investigations. Before I left, I was an assistant zone commander with the city of Atlanta Police Department. The reason I left, there was a city that was created, newly created, north of the city called the city of Sandy Springs. It was a new city that was created, and they needed a new police department. I left there and went to be a commander to help develop from the ground up a new police department working with a public-private sector government. I was there for 7 years when Clayton County Police Department was looking for a deputy chief. And then I have been a deputy chief of police for Clayton County Police Department for over 4 years. The reason why I would be a good fit for the city of Fayetteville is because I've watched the city of Fayetteville. I researched it when the opening came up. I've had different opportunities. People made phone calls, not just about city of Fayetteville, but other opportunities of other chief positions. I have family, secondary family, that live close, and I always have that connect from my original coming here for college. When I researched the city of Fayetteville, I looked at the police department. I was familiar with Chief Metlock and all the great things that he was doing with the police department because we were doing similar things in the open data portal, working with in Washington. And I looked at the department and said, wow, they're doing amazing things in the community. So I did a little bit more research and see what the city was actually doing. And that's the reason why I decided to make that application. I saw so much going on in the city regarding revitalization, the downtown changing, new baseball stadium coming, new hotels coming. I saw the development of working with the community and the police department. So what that meant to me was the city government was working well with the community, and they really wanted to move this city in a new direction. I saw that the police department had officers that were really invested in making a difference with the community. And what better way to be a part of something that's moving in a good direction? So that's why I put my application, because I felt with all my experience, over 28 years of experience in law enforcement, doing every different level of the police department and government, I could bring something, my experience, my education and training, and learn something also from the community here to take it to a new level. So that's why I feel I'm a good fit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chief Henson?
Good evening. The reason why I believe that I would be a good fit for the city of Fayetteville, I have 26 years of law enforcement experience. All of those years have been with the Greensboro Police Department. I have served in a number of positions. I have served as a lieutenant in the patrol division. I've also served as a watch commander. I've served in the Special Operations Division. In that division, we concentrated on planning for major events, dignitaries, president, vice president coming to our city. And I was actually in charge of formulating those plans to make sure that they were safe coming into our city and safe leaving our city. I also served as the lieutenant in operational support over the schools, over the housing community in Greensboro. And I was promoted to captain, and I was captain over District 4, where I was in command of at least right over 100 officers. I did that for 3 years, made a lot of changes to really affect the community in a positive way. And lastly, I was promoted to deputy chief, and I'm now over the patrol bureau to where I supervise approximately 450 officers. And the reason why I think I'd be a good fit is because I consider myself to be, one, a change agent. In each and every assignment that I've had, I have brought about change, whether that change was reducing crime or building partnerships or affecting the quality of life. I think that each and every role that you take on, you have to take on that role in such a manner that you are an effective leader. I've also concentrated on building relationships within the agency. We as leaders often, I don't want to say we forget about our officers, but as we build those relationships in the community, we have to build those same relationships in the agency as well. And those are just a few reasons why I strongly believe that I would be a good fit for this city. And I would just like to say this: I'm passionate about what I do. And not only am I passionate about what I do, my golden rule is this, and I've told this to each and every officer that I supervise: treat each and every encounter like you would want your closest family member treated. And if we do that, we're going to be okay. And that has made a great difference in Greensboro, and I hope that I can have that same impact here in Fayetteville.
Thank you. Okay. Chief Kelly?
Good evening. I'm home. Born and raised in Fayetteville, 22 years on the Fayetteville Police Department, graduated from Southview High School, went to Fayetteville State University here in Fayetteville, joined the department in 1995, was a training officer, made sergeant in about 5 years, and went to internal affairs, which really opened my eyes as it related to policing and how we police ourselves. I did that for about 3 years, did youth services for about 3 years as well. That was extremely challenging. Made lieutenant and made lieutenant and became the recruiter. Again, my eyes were opened, looking at the quality of employees that we had coming into the department. And it was my sole responsibility to ensure that we had the right people on the streets, treating people like they deserved to be treated. Made captain, was a patrol commander for a while, did that, and then made assistant chief in charge of patrol. And so I watched this city grow. I walked downtown, and where there was the clubs that kids can't go and look into were downtown. And I watched this city grow. And I grew with this city. And I watched this city change, and I watched this city want to become better. We've had some dark times in this city as it relates to police-community relations, but the light has come on. And I believe that I was an important part of why we have the relationship that we have with this community. And so moving forward, my experience here home and the last 8 months that I've proven myself as interim that I would be qualified for this position.
Thank you. The next question I have, and we'll start with Chief Henson on this one. Again, each candidate will have 2 minutes to speak. What values will you bring to the Fayetteville Police Department?
The values that I would bring to the Fayetteville Police Department are those core values. Our officers would conduct themselves with honor, integrity, and respect. And as I stated before, I strongly believe that each and every encounter that we have, we should want that encounter to be like we would want our closest family member treated. And that would be your mom, your dad, or your brother, your sister. And I just firmly believe that if you treat people with respect, respect goes a long way. And people of the community can really tell if you really are sincere about what you're doing or if this is just a job. What we need to have here at the Fayetteville Police Department, in my opinion, is officers that are going to go out and care about their community each and every day. They're going to continue to work hard to build those relationships in such a way that we partner to reduce crime. And one thing I can tell you, that we can't reduce crime on our own. We have to have the eyes and ears of the citizens working with us day in and day out. And the only way that we're going to be able to have that, you all are going to have to trust us. But like my father used to tell me, and I'm a PK, and that's the preacher's kid, you've got to earn trust. And our officers will earn it, and we will do the right thing each and every day.
Chief Kelly?
You know, growing up in a household where I was fortunate enough to have a mother and a father present, I gained those values, those family values. And I think that our society is suffering as it relates to family values. You know, I wonder sometimes where I would be if I didn't have the parents that I had and what they taught me. Yeah, my mama whooped me. And yeah, I call her the warden. But now I understand. I get it. She always taught me. I had Sundays to wash dishes. And I was asking my mother, why do I have Sundays? You know, Sundays back then, for those who don't know, washing dishes was a hard time. And she said, because you did it well. My mother always taught me, whatever you do, your very best. Your very best. And so by being the chief of Fayetteville, I will demand that our officers give their very best. And we don't accept anything less. The citizens of Fayetteville do not deserve anything less but the very best from our officers. You know, I bring trust. I've built relationships in this community over 22 years. over the last 5 years, those relationships have grown to a heightened level. And I'm extremely proud of the relationship that I have with our religious community, our business community, our community watches. You know, they know me, I know them, and they trust if I say I'm going to do something, if we make a mistake, I'll fix that mistake. They trust me. They understand me, and I understand them. And by having that relationship, I think we will take this to another level.
Okay. Chief Hawkins.
Thank you. You asked what values would I bring. The values that I steer off all stem from my faith, my family, and my community, ever since I've been a little girl. I'm a middle child that was very vocal as a middle child. My father allowed me to vent many times, often when I probably shouldn't have been venting. I probably should have kept my mouth closed a lot of times. But what that taught me was he empowered me to speak up and stand up from times that people weren't being treated right. So growing up, I found myself loving to defend people who were treated wrong, loving to defend when things weren't fair. My father worked in for an industrial company where he was actually a union steward, and so he represented the people on their behalf. He would also oftentimes ask me to help him write a defense, looking up the rules and regulations. So I saw that as powerful. I saw that as, okay, let me help you put the words correctly to make this defense. So I originally thought I wanted to be an attorney to make the defense, but those core values of my faith, my family, and my community have stayed with me. When I became an officer, I was so naive to what police officers did. I truly believed all officers did the right things all the time. I was a kid. I literally was probably on the City of Atlanta Police Department in my second year, and I realized that wasn't true. But that didn't change what I felt I was there for. So I have a passion for always doing right and standing up for what is the right thing to do. So I wasn't the officer that looked the other way. They knew that I would speak up if I saw things that were done wrong. They knew I was an advocate for everyone. I was an advocate for doing the right thing. It became a passion. It became a passion when I had the opportunity to work in the Office of Professional Standards and Internal Affairs, because what I believed was I was standing as an officer with honor, integrity. And there were certain people that was probably hired that shouldn't stand there because you had a trust for the community that you were responsible for. So throughout my career, I've stood up and I've defended what was right. And I've had that passion, and I think it was a blessing that I started with the City of Atlanta, because that's a civil rights history. So they were already moving forward with issues that dealt with doing the right thing for the minority population. So we were trained in community, dealing with the community. We were trained right from the start. We knew how to relate to people. Even though I've been in this field this long, it wasn't always that way. So I've learned a lot of things in regards to communication. I realized that everyone probably doesn't understand how to communicate, and they should. They should learn how to train in that aspect. They may not be afforded that opportunity. So with that passion, I have the ability, when I started promoting in positions, I realized I can't make a big difference until I start becoming and being placed in a position where I can have a voice internally to affect the people externally in the community. So my values will always stem from doing the right thing for the community, even if I'm in uniform, out of uniform, because I always feel that how you may stop my children, you may stop my mother, my family member. I want to make sure whoever's out there representing law enforcement, if you stop my family member, you would treat them the same way I would treat them. So that's the values I would bring for the City of Fayetteville.
All right, so we'll start with Chief Kelly with the third question, which is, what do you see as your biggest challenge in assuming the duties of Chief of Police, should you be selected?
Thank you, sir. So looking at the trend nationally, we talk about violent crimes. You know, I think we've lost our way in this country as it relates to valuing others. So having an impact on reducing violent crimes will be a challenge for law enforcement across this country. You know, when we talk about fighting crime, particularly fighting violent crime, is traditionally law enforcement officers are type A personalities, whether you knew that or not. We think we can do everything, and most of the time we try to do everything. And I always use the analogy is you want to try to fix a screw with a wrench. The only thing you're going to do with that is break it. And so what we have to do as a department and even as a country is to look at it different. If you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. So what we have to do as a community, it's almost like it takes a village to raise a child. We have to do that same thing as it relates to fighting crime. You know, the causes of crime is what we need to tackle, is the causations of crimes. So we talk about education, we talk about economics, we talk about mental health. Those are fields and specialties that law enforcement, you know, generally doesn't possess. So what we need to do is we need to come together as a community, and each part of the community, and you know, put religion in there as well, because that's extremely important. You put all those pieces together and everybody does their part. What can you do as part of society to reduce crime? Because someone may have issues with education, now they can't get a job, and then now they're committing crimes, and so now they have a felony, and now they're really in the hole. So what other entities can help law enforcement? So by bringing all of those entities together, we can reduce and prevent violent crimes.
Chief Hawkins.
Thank you. Okay, so the main issues, what our purpose is in law enforcement is ultimately making the community safe. So that will always be the concern, no matter where any law enforcement person should be. So the main challenge, like Chief Kelly said, across the nation, crimes against persons is on the rise. And it's not just, Fayetteville's having the same issues that many communities are having right now. Making the difference of understanding what's happening, why is a trend occurring, communicating. That's one issue, that one of the challenges. The next challenge for me personally will be getting to know the community, my police department, and building that trust. I understand they don't know me, so it's going to take some time for me to hear what their concerns are, to listen to them, and to build that trust and that relationship, to know that I am truly invested in them and making the community safer. The third thing that's a high priority is what I've read and researched is the concerns of the community that the police department is not as diverse, and looking at evaluating what ways we can make it more diverse. And if we are fully staffed, then what ways can we train our present officers in being more diverse and being more aware and being trained on the different cultures that are in the community. So that will be my top issues.
Great, thank you. All right, we'll move back again to Chief Hawkins, and the question is, what is your philosophy on community policing?
I didn't get to go.
Who did I skip? I'm
Me.
sorry. Thanks. I'm supposed to be the moderator, but you're keeping me under control. Thanks. Go ahead, James. I'm sorry.
Okay, I still love you. The biggest challenges for me would be, one, getting to know the community. Now, how would I do that? Right away, we would start having forums, because I want to be in the community, not just me, my officers as well. I know that those forums would allow us to connect with the community even more. We would have a deeper understanding of what the concerns are, because I firmly believe that we can't police the proper way if we don't know what the concerns are. And if we're not in the community, communicating with the community, finding out what's going on, how can we really address your concerns, and more importantly, you feel safe. The second thing I want to do is make sure each and every citizen in Fayetteville feels safe going out with their families, whether that's to the mall, whether that's to the movies, to the grocery store. When you look at the year 2016, you had 31 homicides. The year before that, you had 19. The year before that, you had 21. When you look at the 31 homicides, those homicides were at an all-time high for 23 years. We have to make sure that our citizens feel safe. I have visited the city of Fayetteville with a good friend of mine who's in attendance here tonight. I won't reveal who he is, but I've had the opportunity to speak with my good friend and some others, and they said they don't feel safe because crime is on the rise, and they feel if they go out to the mall, they're going to get attacked. Our job as police officers is to make sure that we are protecting and serving, and that we are making sure that our citizens feel safe. Now, how are we going to do that? One, you're going to have to get to know your officers even better. Two, you're going to have to trust your officers and believe that they're going to do the right thing. Three, we're going to have to know what the concerns are so that we can address those concerns. Because when we get those concerns from the community meetings, I'm going to take those concerns back to my team, and we're going to develop a 5-year strategic plan to address those concerns. And finally, recruiting. Recruiting is something that we're going to have to really look at, because in order to be an effective agency, we have to represent the community that we serve. 46% Caucasian, 41% African American, 10% Hispanic. You have over 20,000 Hispanics in the community, 3% Asian. So when you look at the very diverse community, we're going to have to ensure that we are bringing on officers that represent the community that we serve. Because if we do that, we're going to improve those relationships. And again, the city is very diverse, and we have to make sure that the officers that we're bringing on have a thought process that will be diverse as well. We can't bring on officers that have a one-track mind and they're not focused on the needs of the community. Officers have to be able to adjust and adapt to whatever situation that they come upon. Crime and recruiting and our officers serving and protecting the right way would be the things that I would put at a high priority for the Fayetteville Police Department.
Thank you. Okay, Chief Hawkins, what is your philosophy on community policing, and does that philosophy encompass all neighborhoods or merely the higher crime areas?
Very good question. So my philosophy on community policing, I believe that to have effective, I call it community engagement, you need crucial things. You need good communication, good interpersonal skills, and good skills to learn how to problem solve. With that, you need to be able to empower every person on the department, whether it be sworn and non-sworn, to have community engagement and community policing, because we are basically in customer service. We are servants. But when you go to a business or when you go to a location and you have bad customer service, you don't want to go there anymore. So why would you want to have officers that you call to help and assist you that have bad customer service? So all those things, my philosophy means that you have to be able to know how to communicate, know how to be engaged, and not be afraid to encounter some of the unknown, a community that you don't know. So as it regards to, absolutely not. Every part of the community has to be engaged, has to be a part of the police department, not just the ones that are, as you mentioned. So I have that experience as well. Even though I came from, started with City of Atlanta, I was in a high crime area before I left. So we had a lot of community engagement in issues, dealing with issues. When I went to Sandy Springs, it was a more affluent area. We had community involvement in Sandy Springs because they had their own issues. Every part of the city and every part of the community has their own issues and concerns and deserves that same community involvement from the police department, just as the same their issues. So in order to get that, you need to listen to every part of the city, different parts of the area, and that's the responsibility of, right here they have the captains. The captains of different areas have different diverse communities. So they need to know who's living in the communities, what are the concerns. What might be concerning to you regarding crime might be a neighborhood code enforcement issue for someone else. We are in the job of problem solving realistically as law enforcement officers. We have that experience because when you can't figure out simple issues like why my child can't go to school, which is like a community issue for some people, or you might have an issue with your neighbor not keeping up with the grass, you might call 911. When the officer responds, they need to be problem solvers. So we definitely don't just focus on one part. You need to focus on solving problems and being community engaged. And I know Fayetteville does an awesome job. They do an excellent job in community policing. I feel that there are other ways that we can empower every level, like I said, to do even more and take it on to the next level. Thank you.
Chief Henson?
My thoughts on community policing. We are going to serve all and protect all. Community policing, what is it? It's the community and the police working together to bring about change. I strongly believe that there is no way that any police department can be effective if they do not have the trust of the community. They do not have the community believing in what you do. And you know what happens when you have good community policing? If you have a controversial issue that takes place, the community is going to know that you are going to take care of that particular issue because they know and they trust in their police department. And the only way that we can do that is, and I frequently refer to this phrase, I call it boots on the ground. I strongly believe that officers have to be in their cars, but I also believe that officers have to get out of their vehicles and they have to do some walking and talking. They have to get out of the community and knock on doors, introduce themselves. Knock on the door and find out what is your concern, what is your problem, how can I be of assistance? And then you know what happens? You get to know that police officer on a one-on-one basis. You might get to know how many kids that officer has. What does he like to do? And you know, when you get to look at that officer in that way, my goal with community policing is looking beyond the badge because we are part of the community too. We live here, we work here, we play here. And we just don't want you to see us as someone with a badge and a gun. We want you to see us as someone that cares about this community, someone that's going to work in establishing and making Fayetteville the best city that it can be. And guess what happens when we all come to the table? When we all sit down to the table, we create understanding. We create that level of communication that lets everyone know that we're all on the same page. And we're working to make Fayetteville a better city. And one thing that I've noticed and I recognized in my research in looking at all of the council members, their top priority was reducing crime, revitalization, and economic development. Now, how are we going to get there? We're going to get there by partnering and working together, reducing crime, building those relationships, and knowing that the Fayetteville Police Department, we have the backs of each and every citizen, but you know what? We need you all to have our backs as well. If you see something in your community, let us know. And letting us know, you have to believe and you will know that we're going to be responsive. We're going to respond. We're going to address those issues. But not only are we going to address those issues, we're going to sit at the table together as brothers and sisters and develop ways and strategies to where we can work on making this city the best city in the world. Thank you.
Chief Kelly?
One agency, excuse me, one community, one family, one. That answers that question that you just posed. You know, we see Fayetteville different. We're not rich. We're not poor. We're not black. We're not white. We're not Asian. We're Fayetteville. And we will treat each other the same. You know, we do a lot of community policing. We have 9 sectors in the city, and each sector hosts a community event. We may go skating with a kid, popsicle with a cop, splash with the cop, you name it. But what that does, it begins to break down the barriers as it relates to police and the community, especially young people. You know, you go to the store sometime and you see a child who's acting up a little bit, and the parent will say, "See that cop? I'm going to make him get you." And I always would say, "Oh, no, you won't. No. Don't make me be the bad guy." So while we interact with those kids, having fun, and they realize that you're just a big kid at heart yourself. So you start interacting with the community, and you do things that not necessarily talk about law enforcement. You talk about life. And you talk about the topic of life, and you'll understand that we're the same. We have bills, we have bad children, we have car payments, you name it. But what that does is it breaks down the divide. And when you break down the divide, like Chief Henson mentioned, is that you will trust me to tell me when I need something. When you need something, you'll be able to communicate with me and know that I will do what I need to do to make sure that your community is safe. You know, we do Operation Ceasefire Movie Night. I've had officers, like Chief Henson said, you know, Operation Just Because. And what is that? I just told officers to get out, they see somebody playing in the yard, cutting the grass, and talk about the weather in Puerto Rico. It doesn't matter, as long as they get to know who you are and what you do and what you're about. So that's what I see community policing is that we take it the next step. We talk about getting to know each other.
Thank you. Next round of questions, we'll start with Chief Henson. And the question is, what technology or methods would you plan to employ to continue to move the Fayetteville Police Department forward?
Okay. Well, I understand that they currently have body-worn cameras. I believe that body-worn cameras are very essential for police departments to move forward. But not only are they very essential, we have to make sure that we can manage that in such a way that we can afford it. The storage of that footage is very expensive. If you don't have the contract or the agreement worked out in such a way to where it can be affordable for you, it's going to outgrow your budget, and it's going to outgrow your budget fast. And you have to make sure your policies and procedures are in line to ensure that viewing of the body-worn cameras or the overall operation of those will fall in line with the needs of the public and the needs of the community. I also believe that officers no longer are really restricted to just the cars. They are out moving about and around, and we have to make sure that they have the necessary equipment when they get out of their cars, whether that's going to be a smartphone or a tablet, also Fitbits. I think we need to look at that, because when you look at Fitbits would be utilized to measure the stress in officers. We want to make sure that our officers are, I don't want to use the terminology stress-free, but you have to be able to manage that. If we know that Officer Smith, the recordings are that he is continuing to be stressed out, then we need to do some early intervention. And if we can monitor that and stay ahead of that, we can keep our officers on the streets and they can be healthy. Also looking at license plate readers. License plate readers are a very, very important tool, because they can pretty much monitor vehicles coming in and out of your city, and they can determine if vehicles are stolen, if individuals are in those vehicles or registered to those vehicles that are wanted, and also if there's any activity that has occurred in another city. That is also very important. But it is really important that whatever technology we have, it manages the police department in such a way that we can continue to move forward. Technology is the key, but when, in my final statement with technology, we have to have the technology necessary to forecast and look at crime. We can go out here every day and try to prevent crime, but it is good to know and have equipment to where we can forecast that over here in the east side of Fayetteville, in 3 months, we know, or we have technology that's letting us know that there's going to be a rise in residential burglaries. We have technology to let us know that there's going to be a rise in assaults, so that we can go ahead and start putting things in and be very preventive in trying to address these in a very, very proactive way. That technology is out there. We can utilize that technology. And last but not least, the technology is to keep our officers on the streets, because, again, if they can't stay on the streets, then we can't keep our community safe. We have to make sure that we provide different wellness programs to assist them in managing stress, eating habits, things of that nature, so that they can continue to be healthy and serve the citizens of our great city.
Thank you. Chief Kelly?
Thank you, sir. So at the end of this month, we're going to roll out an app a police department app. And we talked about a challenge earlier on how it relates to communicating with young people. And young folks don't communicate verbally as much as we did. And so how do you reach those people? Through technology. And we're gonna use this app to be able to have our citizens report crimes, get reports. So if they're looking for a new home and they go in an area, they will be able to pull that crime information on the neighborhood where they live and see what goes on in and around their neighborhood. And though that's the information that our citizens want to have, it's about convenience and what it takes to be informed, to make good informed decisions. What I want to bring is a driving or shooting simulator. You know, we talk about, Chief Hanson talked about safety for officers. We don't back up very well. And so we'll back up over almost anything. So what we need to do is we need to do driver training, which saves us money in the long run, which saves us vehicles being damaged in the long run. And we need to have simulations as it relates to use of force, firearms training, and those things, because, you know, we want to put our officers in real life situations. Putting our officers in real life situations as much as we can, as often as we can. So when they're faced with those situations, God forbid, when we're talking about deadly force, that they will have been trained enough to make the right decision. You know, you put yourself in a stressful situation once a year, you might not make the right decision. But if you're constantly doing that, you're constantly training, the military does it all the time. You're constantly training, it becomes second nature. And by using simulation, we will be able to make sure that when we put our officers in situations, they will be able to slow that situation down and make the right decision.
Chief Hawkins?
Thank you. So that is definitely a good issue. I'm very familiar with a lot of different type of technologies that's out there and for law enforcement, whether it be hard technology like a microchip fingerprinting system, so that when officers are out there, they need to be able to check and see if someone is wanted. They have it available for them right away. My department has that right now. Or whether it's soft technology, software that's going to help their investigation a little bit better. We did the tour today of the police department. They had a lot of great things that they have already existing, already moving forward. So to be able to make that decision and say what I'm going to bring in, first I need to know what they have. They already might have, which is excellent tool, license plate readers. They might already have different things that I don't know that are handheld devices. I'm not sure. I need to know, and then I need to hear from them. I did listen when they were talking in different parts of the department, and I saw things that could help them. There's a software that's called Media Sonar that helps with apps and investigation with social media, that helps us address crimes like gang crime issues, what's going out, that connect the dots of social media. Don't know if they have it or not, but it'll be an excellent tool for that aspect for crime analysis. I saw preparing a case file. That's hard work. Maybe there's I'm familiar with software that can track the investigation all the way through, put in a file case. That way they can deliver to the DA's office a disk and all the files complete. I don't know what they have already, but I already have ideas and know what's out there. I'm familiar with it, with the software. And we went to the training unit. There's things a training unit could definitely use, because training is crucial for law enforcement, for preventive. The more money you put in training the officers, getting them the right equipment. The shoot house, they needed a better shoot house. They need real life simulation activity to practice. When they practice it, they're empowered, they get confidence, and you have less things like use of force issues. They know the skills. They have the ability to train in tactics. They do CrossFit. Maybe we get better training, scenario-based training, like you said, for crisis intervention. Take them through scenario-based, they have videos, things that are coming out. There's ICAT, communications, dealing with how to deal with situations that they may come with that are addressing mental health issues, crisis intervention. So I don't know, but I definitely want to hear what they have and what the users are the officers. They know, because they do it every day, what they would like, how it would benefit the department, and let's go out there and figure out how we can get what they need to do their jobs a lot better. So I would need to know first, do a better assessment. What do you have? How are you doing it? Because they're doing a lot of great things, but I know little things that can help their job do a little bit better. Let's try to implement that. So that's what I would bring.
Folks, I also forgot to mention when we started that we're shooting to wrap up between 8:15 and 8 o'clock. So just so you can plan your evening. Okay.
Dr. Strauss, could we just remind the candidates we got to keep closer to that 2-minute time limit if we could, just so we can make sure we get more questions in between now and the end of that session?
So I'm going
Thank
to be
you.
a little stricter about the 2 minutes. Yeah. Okay. All right. So the next question, and I believe we start with Chief Kelly on this one. Explain how you've reduced crime in your community and how you would do it here in Fayetteville.
So when we talk about reducing crime, we looked at, and ironically, an article came out in the newspaper Sunday about the increase in aggravated assaults. And so looking at January to this year, January was an extremely rough month as it relates to aggravated assaults. We had one incident where it was a bingo parlor and a subject was shot inside of a bingo parlor. There was 115 people inside that bingo parlor. One person was struck with a bullet, non-life-threatening injuries. That's 116 aggravated assaults. And so when we look at numbers, we have to make sure that we're looking at numbers the right way. Because when you start deploying your officers based on numbers alone, you may make a crucial mistake, because if you see an increase in a particular crime and you don't analyze it, and we analyze crime every Wednesday morning at CompStat. We use real-time data for our officers. As a report is submitted, that pops up on an officer's screen, and they see where they need to be deployed. Our sector lieutenants are the boots on the ground, as Chief Henson would say, as it relates to crime fighting. They are our mini police chiefs in our sector, and that concept is extremely important to our reducing crimes. We have a 30% reduction in residential break-ins. When you talk about residential break-ins, that hits home. So we concentrate on making sure that when you go to work in the morning or at night, that your homes remain safe. So we deploy our officers based on the data that we receive, and we're constantly reading that data, analyzing that data, and predicting when and where the next crime is going to be. And my last point is, we talk about what does a victim look like moving forward. We need to start analyzing what makes a person a victim and start addressing those concerns. Thank you.
Chief Hawkins?
Okay, so as I mentioned before, the crime trend is same or similar across. What have I done? I've been involved in the CompStat method of law enforcement and dealing with it, which is basically CompStat is everyone getting together in the department to identify the crime, the location of the crime, assessing what are you doing about the crime, and try to come up with strategic plans to deal with those problems. When you have historical information, that should help. When you have conversation, when you know if there's an anomaly happening in a community how about the weather? The weather affects crime. But you can't do that unless you come together as a department and have those discussions. And have those discussions to say, what are you doing in your community? What's working in your community? What's working in your neighborhoods? To have those discussions. Ultimately, though, to deal with specific crimes, we know that it's been proven the majority of crimes are being occurred with a small amount of the community. So you're going to have repeat offender scenarios, the same people doing the same crimes across the board. When you create a database and you keep up with those individuals, you keep up with you make partnerships with probation and parole, you're able to monitor those individuals with the type of crimes that they pretty much stick. A burglar is going to pretty much be a burglar. A gang member is going to be a gang member. They're going to either deal with drugs or have issues with guns. So you're able to monitor their mode of crime that they want to stick to. So partnering up with probation and parole, monitoring, working with the sheriff department to see who may be getting released soon, and having those communications within your police department to have those discussions. An example happened, we had a robbery occurring that was focusing on Asian restaurants. Once we talked about it, we realized not only was it happening in our community, but it was happening in other jurisdictions. So we start sharing the information. We were able to give the information out to it was just focused on Asian restaurants, business owners. We went there and educated the community about not taking the money home, and we were able to catch that working in partnership, so.
Okay, Chief Henson?
I'll talk about 4 initiatives that I led to reduce crime. First one, downtown Greensboro. We had some issues with our young people coming downtown, vandalizing certain parts of the city, and just being unruly, fights and things of that nature were breaking out. What did we do? We partnered with the ministers of our community, and we did walk and talks. Not just the ministers, but anyone who wanted to come out and walk with us. We did those walks from 10 p.m. to 1 o'clock in the morning. We passed out a little flyer, and that little flyer said, "Help keep our city safe." And what did that do? That brought down crime 17% in the downtown area. It also reduced the number of calls by 300 in a matter of 4 months. Think what you can do with the reduction of 300 calls. Another initiative was addressing one of our off-campus housing. We had a homicide there that occurred with one of our students that lived there. My officers, our team, we went in and we partnered with A&T State University, and we developed a strategy to where we could concentrate on violent crime, making contact with those students, because those students didn't look at us like we were going to assist them, going to help them. We established those relationships. We walked in the community, we knocked on the doors, and we talked to them about being more responsible. If you're going to have a party, you can't have a house party with 300 people in a room. You're going to have a party with maybe 5 or 10, and you're going to have to be responsible if you're doing that. And one other initiative, violent crime. What we did, we got all of our bureaus on the same page. Violent crime was going up all across the city. We all got on the same page. We looked at where the violent crime was occurring in our city, and those were going to be our hotspot locations. We all worked together and not apart. And working together and identifying those locations, we were able to cause an 8% reduction in those violent crime locations. And lastly, residential burglaries. We partnered with a company called Quickset Locks. They donated 300 locks to the Greensboro Police Department. We went out with contractors and installed those locks in homes of burglary victims, and we continued to drive residential burglaries down 20%. Those partnerships are what reduces crimes, but working together and being on the same page is even more effective.
Okay. The next question, and we'll start with Chief Hawkins again, is what is the most challenging issue you have faced in your career, and how did you overcome that challenge?
Okay, so challenging issue, I've mentioned before that I've stood firm on always making sure we are on the forefront of doing what's right all the time. I've often faced many issues throughout my career, but also I'll go back a little bit on one of the most recent issues we had a few years ago in Clayton County. We had a case where an elderly man use of force was used against him at a high level, and there was not a report made about it, a regular police report. There was not a use of force report made about it, and we had to find out about it 2 weeks later. Because the media called, there was a neighbor who recorded it on a cell phone. We had supervisors on the scene, and nobody had documented it. That created an environment of understanding that had to exist, a cultural issue of not doing the right thing. We had to we were working behind the 8 ball and getting the trust with the community built back up again, and letting them know that we were going to do the investigation, we were going to do a due process, and we were going to make movements as fast as possible. We had a march on the police department as a result, but ultimately it dealt with a couple people leaving the department, and the community realizing that they are going to do the right thing. But those relationships had to be built ahead of time for them to trust us and trust what we said that we were going to do. So those challenges are going to be coming in the future. That's why it's important to build those relationships ahead of time, because if an officer makes a mistake, if an officer makes a bad decision, we need to be able to know that, trust our word, trust what we're training officers to do, and if there's a mistake made, we're going to do the right thing ultimately at the end.
Chief Ensign?
One of the most challenging times in my career was approximately 12 years ago. We had officers in our agency that were acting out of their scope of authority. They were violating rules, policies, and directives. And as a result of that, many officers were being targeted. What I did, I came forward with this information, and I just didn't come forward with this information by myself. There were other officers that joined in, and we made this information known to the administration that there were several officers acting out of their scope of authority. The administration immediately took action, but there were some bumps along the road. There were many things said about many officers in our agency, including myself, things that were not true, and things that put my family through a lot. But what I discovered, in the face of adversity, you have to take a stand. And even if you have to stand alone, I realized that God stood by me. And I believed in God, and I put my faith in my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And he got me through that time, along with my wonderful wife and my son that are here. Sometimes when things aren't going right in your agency, if you are silent and you say nothing, there's going to be no change. But if you take a stand, you'll be surprised the number of people that will take that stand with you. And because of that, what have we now done at our agency? We now have rules and policies in place to make sure that we will no longer revisit those dark times. We now have these rules and policies in place that each and every officer knows when they come to work, they're going to be treated right. Because I firmly believe we constantly talk about treating the community right. We have to treat each other right in our agencies. Because if we can't treat each other right, the citizens aren't going to think that they can be treated right. So we've built those relationships to where we're now a stronger agency. And we are unified, and we have outstanding leadership. Many of those officers that acted out of their scope of authority are now gone. But if nothing would have been said, we could still be in the same quagmire that we were in 12 years ago. So those were some challenging times. But in closing, I'll just say, if you put God first and you do the right thing and you operate for the greater good of the community and the agency, everything's going to be okay.
Chief Kelly?
So a few years ago, the department went through driving while black. I was a patrol captain while driving while black took place. What did that do to me as a African American commander? I was hurt because, we had a community that felt like its department was stopping folks just because of the color of their skin. That hurt. So I looked and I watched and I listened and I watched this city divide. And I watched our department divide. And we thought we were somewhere farther along than what we really were. And that was hurtful. And so what we did as a police department, as a mistake, is that we dug our heels in the ground. That was a mistake. The only thing that we had to do is get to the table, sit down, and talk. Because if someone felt like they were being mistreated, whether we were or not, that's not even a question. If someone felt that way, then we need to deal with how they feel. So that was our mistake. So where are we now? So when we have officer-involved shootings across this country, when people want to protest in the city of Fayetteville, guess what happens? We march together as one community. They don't march against law enforcement anymore in Fayetteville. We march together. Guess what happens now when I'm in a stressful situation or a situation that may become volatile? I call the local NAACP leader. I call Mr. Buxton, and we sit down and we talk. He tells me we have true conversations. So that was a challenge, and that's how we overcame it.
Okay, next question, and we'll start with Chief Henson. Is statistical data shows that there are more black motorists stopped and searched than white motorists. What method would you use to verify that these stops are not racially motivated?
Well, we were featured in the New York Times a year or so ago, and it focused on our agency stopping more African Americans than Caucasians and searching those individuals. What I was very instrumental in doing is talking with our officers, our chief, and letting everyone know that we've got to do something. We've got to put things in place. One thing that was put in place immediately, when officers stop vehicles, they are filling out the necessary paperwork to indicate why they're stopping that vehicle, the location, and the reason why. And also, if we're going to do a search, we can no longer just go fishing and believe that there are drugs in the car. May I search your car, sir or ma'am, because I believe that there are drugs in the car. Now we have a policy that regulates that. We have to have a reasonable probable cause to ask you, can we search your car? And these policies and procedures guide us in such a way that now we're more accountable. We're more responsible to our community. And I will say this, when you look at violent crime, we are going to have to be aggressive in dealing with violent crime, but you got to do that the right way. You just can't go out here and stop cars just because you feel as though, or you have a hunch. You have to have probable cause or a reason to stop that car, and you have to have probable cause or reason to ask for a search or to conduct a search. And I believe that you have to have policies and procedures in place that regulate that. And if it ever comes into play, that we can go back and we can pull this, the information, and we can be transparent with our community and letting them know that we stopped these cars, 25 cars, and this was the reason why. And we searched 22 of those cars, and this was the reason why. We made X number of arrests. We have to be able to put that information out to the community so that they can continue to trust us. Policies and procedures will have to be in place, but not only in place, but followed.
Okay, Chief Kelly?
Thank you, sir. So when we talk about traffic stops, what we do in the Fayetteville Police Department, we look at traffic stops based on moving and non-moving. And so we concentrate on those traffic stops that help save lives. When you talk about doing a traffic stop for a license tag being expired or a brake light being out, you have to take in consideration what you're doing to folks economically. You talk about insurance and those things. And so when you start looking at those, you set yourself up for being accused of profiling. And so when we do traffic stops, we use moving violations as the reason for the stop. And like Chief Henson says, and once you make that stop, and if there's reasons for you to believe that there's something else going on, then you conduct yourself accordingly. But how do you make sure that that's been done properly? And so what we've done is we've had a supervisor for each district is responsible for reviewing random videos of traffic stops. So that supervisor will go in and look at random traffic stops to ensure that our officers are not racially profiling based on color. And so we do that. Our officers know that you are being, looked at, making sure that you're doing things for the right reasons. But to take it even further, you have to make sure our officers know the community. We break down those barriers. We break down those stereotypes. And we do that by, we talked about it earlier in the forum, relationships. If I have a relationship with you, I'm less likely to accuse you of anything. And so once you interact with folks and you realize that everybody's not, a criminal, because I get to know who you are. I think that deters folks from becoming biased, and we talk about bias. We do bias training annually. We continue to make sure that our officers are aware of their biases and make sure that they are treating everyone equal.
Chief Hawkins?
Thank you, Dr. Strauss. So you said the statistical data show that the predominantly minority being stopped. That would be crucial information, first of all, to analyze that data. That statement alone doesn't tell me a story. But if I'm conducting CompStats every week, then I should be able to, myself as well as the commanders in the unit, understand why we're either in that community or in that area. What are we targeting? What's the purpose we're doing it? And we should be able to justify it. When we analyze that data and cannot justify a rationale for why this area, we have either crime issues, we either have pedestrian fatalities, whatever the issue that we're trying to address as a community, because the community is telling us it's a problem, we should be able to show the results of that issue. I did an initiative for our traffic unit because the pedestrian fatalities and injuries were on the rise in my community. So we figured out, how can we address this problem to stop this fatality? What can we do? So we said, okay, we can utilize our traffic unit to address a problem. That doesn't mean we're going to give everyone who is crossing the street a ticket. That means we need to address the problem. So we did a 2-week initiative. We put it out to the public on our Facebook page and our internet and our communities to say, we're going to be out here addressing pedestrians constantly. The first week, we let them know. The first week, we're going to stop you, talk to you, and give you information about the law and what to do and what not to do. The second week, we will be issuing citations. So that was to target pedestrian fatalities. When you communicate to the public what you're doing and why you're out there, then the statistical data makes sense. When we can't make sense with that data, then there's a problem. And then we start dealing with addressing. I had another scenario where there's an officer always issuing tickets, and he was valid with issuing tickets. He was very strict with it. So I couldn't understand why he wanted to follow the letter of law to restrict this. So I brought him in. I said, do you understand the value of the relationship building? Why don't you issue a warning? And he said, our policy doesn't allow us. That was my first, what do you mean? And I went and researched. I'm like, what? So we changed the policy to say you can issue a warning ticket now. So thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next question is for, I believe we're at Chief Kelly at this point, right? Is it your turn? Yeah. Cities have many populations that the police interact with on a daily basis. One of those groups is often ignored. What would you do to address the city's growing homeless population?
So when we talk about homeless, and it's a tragic situation, and so one of the things that we do now, we have a officer dedicated to the homeless population, and we do a lot of work with coalitions and groups that deal with the homeless population. But this is the question, is that, and I talked about it earlier, I have a wrench that needs a screw. So what we need to do is we need to partner with our churches, with our social services, with our mental health, with our Veterans Administration, because I have a wrench. And the tools that I fix, or the bolts and the nuts that I fix, doesn't necessarily deal with homelessness. But we're open 24/7. So what we need to do as law enforcement is partnership, collaborate with agencies, entities, private and public, to make sure that we're not leaving our homeless population behind, and to ensure that they feel safe in our community as well. And so some of the things that we need to do is we need to identify, as officers on patrol, is when we're out with a person who is homeless, is that we know where to refer them. We have those sources available right then and right there to ensure that we direct them in the right place to get the help that they need. We also need to solicit for help for those individuals. We need to get our economical contacts and say, hey, are you willing to hire folks? So those are some of the conversations that we need to have to ensure that everyone is involved as it relates to homelessness.
Thank you. Chief Hawkins?
Thank you. Chief Kelly is accurate. Those partnerships are crucial. Working with Fayetteville Cumberland Human Relations Organization to say what's out there, what are our resources. He says we already have partnerships with the entities because being homeless is not a crime. But it does cause issues with possible future economic development. It does cause issues with complaints of safety when you have someone either soliciting off the expressway. It causes issues in the community that we have to be able to address, but partnering with different groups in order to say, how can we give you aid? Making sure that we are providing the services for the homeless population and we're giving them avenues of resources. They're part of the community as well, and it's a hard challenge with that. We did in our police department last year. There is we did a month that dedicated to homeless, and we did a public information video that dealt with one decision, one can change that avenue. The police department, we created a whole video with officers and put it out there for homeless awareness. So, and I was a major part of that project, so that was very good. It was very fulfilling, and we got with shelters to say, will you help us create this awareness about it? So that's what I would do.
Okay. Chief Henson?
Okay, what I would do is what we're currently doing now. I started an initiative about 3 years ago with the homeless, and this initiative centered around doing health checks. And what I mean by that, we partnered with Cone Hospital. We had a set location where many of our, and I hate to use the word homeless, I will use the word unsheltered, to where they would frequent. And we brought doctors, nurses in to check their blood pressure and to do an overall assessment of many of our unsheltered citizens, to just let them know what their current state was as far as being healthy. And what we also did, we partnered with churches to come out and pray for them. We also partnered with barbershops to come out and give them haircuts. And we also partnered with various individuals that could assist them in getting gainfully employed. So we had a mini job fair there as well, because again, they're part of the community too. They want the same things that you and I have every day. But sometimes they just fall hard on their luck and they just don't know how to get back up. And what do we have to do as a community? We have to help lift them up. We can't just continue to ride by, look at them and say, you know what, we've got this person begging on the streets. You know, they're a disgrace to the city. We can't do that. We have to embrace them. And doing that initiative, taking that initiative, it has allowed us to grow stronger with our unsheltered population. We have relationships now that they come to the police if they have issues. Before, they wouldn't come to the police. So now they feel very comfortable with us. And I'll give you a short story. At one of our last events, there was a young lady there. She was known to hate the police. She came to one of these events, and she received the event well, and she came and she gave me a hug, and she said, Henson, you're okay, and your officers are okay. Because the officers were there working, but we weren't there working in uniforms. We were, some were in plain clothes, and we were not in our full attire because we wanted to let them see us in a different light. And this allowed us to continue to improve those relationships with the homeless in such a way that they trust us. They're now getting jobs, and they are now part of the community and not considered to be part of the problem.
Thank you. One last question for all the candidates, and we'll start with Chief Hawkins. And so we'd like you to have a chance just to wrap up a little bit if there's anything else you'd like to share about yourself. But we'd, as part of that, we'd like to know what distinguishes you as the next chief for the city of Fayetteville.
Thank you. Okay, so I have over 28 years of law enforcement experience, and I've done definitely a lot of work. But what I want to say is I didn't do that by myself. I did that on the shoulders of many great leaders, many great mentors who saw me as a young officer and saw my passion for people wanting to stand up and do the right thing. They saw that I wanted to work and make a difference. So they gave me the opportunity and put me in positions to gain that experience in many different levels, whether it be in investigations. They gave me the ability to create a grant for the track team to work in the community. They gave me the opportunity to use my skills and start initiatives in investigations and internal affairs. I stood on the shoulders of many great leaders that afforded me the opportunity to have the professional training. Have attended the senior management and policing training. I've been to the National Academy. I've been to Israel under the Georgia International Law Enforcement Exchange to study counterterrorism. I was chosen by the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement to represent the organization nationally on a use of force. Presently, I'm a member of use of force task force creation to create database for law enforcement abroad to study the acts of law enforcement so that we can learn and get better. I've stood and been pushed by many. I've learned from them. I've listened to them to say, what can I do better? I've focused on what can I do to improve. I've moved with relationships. I bring many relationships. I know the importance of having connections and understanding we can't do this alone in law enforcement and in the community. So what I bring to Fayetteville is all that, because I think it's my responsibility now to bring on the next leaders and become that leader and lead the city to more economic development, because they're moving in a great direction. I'm ready, prepared to take us to the next level. So,
Thank you. Chief Henson.
What I can bring to the city of Fayetteville, I can be an effective leader by reducing crime. I have done that in the city of Greensboro by developing strategic plans, but not only developing those plans with our team, but developing those plans with our community. You have to listen to the community and take in their concerns when you develop any plans, and also develop wonderful partnerships in our city of Greensboro, partnerships in such a way that they believe in the police and they trust us. And we have to have those partnerships with all of the community, whether it's Black Lives Matter, whether it's our LGBTQ community, whoever it may be. We have to partner with each and every one of the citizens, because every citizen has value and every citizen has worth. But the biggest thing I do, I lead by example. I'm out there with my troops. I will be out there with the troops here in Fayetteville. If I ask them to be boots on the ground, I'll be boots on the ground. I would not ask any one of my officers to do anything that I would be willing to do. If I ask them to kick a door, I'll go out there and I'll kick that door with them. You have to lead by example. You cannot require your officers to do a number of things that you're not willing to do. And moving forward, I want to look at 21st century policing. We often look at use of force, and we always say, was it reasonable and was it justified? But I think we have to take it a notch up here in the city of Fayetteville. Was it necessary? Were the actions of that officer necessary in what they did in being involved in that use of force? And lastly, many of our officers always say this, and I frequently have told my wife this: I'm going to come home at the end of the night. I want each and every officer in the city of Fayetteville to not only say that we're going to come home, but we're going to police in such a way that we all go home, all the citizens of Fayetteville. Thank you.
Chief Kelly.
So I'll end like I started. I'm home. Born and raised in Fayetteville, family raised in Fayetteville. But you know me, and I know you. I've given you my blood, my sweat, and my tears for 22 years, and I watched this city change. I watched you change. I've watched us change, and I like what I see. And Chief Hawkins was correct, and I've gotten to know these two, and it's out of our character to say I, especially me. The last 8 months, if I hadn't proven I can do this job, I don't know what will. You know, Hermine came, tropical storm, dumped a week worth of water on this city. We stood strong. Here comes Matthew, devastated half of North Carolina. I watch our officers risk their lives saving folks. We stood strong. We had presidential visit after presidential visit, none like we've ever seen before. Crazy like I don't know what. Secret Service left here saying, congratulations, you win. But guess what? We didn't end up on CNN. We stood strong. We had a tragic situation where a mother was killed by her boyfriend and the 2 children watched it. I watched this department come together like nothing ever before and adopted those children. That's where this department is now. We are part of this community, and we will take it even further. Thank you.
I hope you all will agree that this is an outstanding group of professionals. They've conducted themselves professionally, but also they're wonderful human beings. I can't tell you how much enjoyment I've had out of interacting with all of them as individuals and also as a group. And I hope you all will join me in giving them a big applause.
If I can get this to work. I also want to thank you all again for coming out. We do have a few minutes where we will make all of the candidates available down front to meet and greet you for a moment. And then we have another engagement for them in about 10 or 15 minutes after that. So again, thank you so much for coming out. And please also fill out the feedback forms either here or online, and they will go to Dr. Strauss, but he will make sure I see all of your feedback as well. Thank you.
Hey, as you're leaving, I'll just let you know that Chief Kelly will be in here in the Lafayette room, Chief Hinson will be out in the lobby, and Chief Hawkins will be out in the Lafayette room as well, so we can spread out the crowd a little bit.